Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my story. I want to give you three kind of big reasons why I decided to become a Christian 10 years ago when I made that decision. I know that a lot of people do kind of these kinds of videos, like my story, my testimony kind of stuff. The difference between this video and some of the others that have been done is that I think oftentimes people will sometimes fall into the trap of talking about how they became a Christian as opposed to specific reasons why. And so in this video, I'm going to be looking more at the reasons why as opposed to kind of the story of how it happened. If you want to know about how, because I know a lot of people like that stuff, there is an organization called Speak Life who have made a video talking about my kind of how story. So if you're interested in that, then I'll put a link somewhere around. I will warn you about that video. I'm having a very, very bad hair day. I sort of have like a double under, you know, like when a wave crashes in on itself. I didn't expect to be on camera that day. Although, to be fair, I look rough a lot of the time. In this video, I'm going to be looking at a few reasons why I decided to become a Christian. So, main reason number one, and I'm going to warn you ahead of time, this kind of has some sub-reasons. So I'm saying three reasons, but then there's a few cheeky sub-reasons in there as well. I just want to be upfront with you guys. Reason number one is because I believe it's true, first and foremost. I always say to people, if something's true, then that information is important. If it's not true, then it's irrelevant. Chuck it out, get rid of it. So that's the most important question to me when I was thinking about Christian faith was, is it true? Because if it is, then it matters a lot. If it's not, then it doesn't matter at all. Around the age of 20, 21, I had a friend who shared some evidence with me, and it made me think because I was like, hang on a minute. I'd always heard there was no evidence, and yet here it seems like there is at least some. And so I started kind of turning over rocks in search of some evidence because I was told by my friend that there was quite a lot. So evidence number one that I want to point to is the prophecies. So just a bit of Bible context for you here if you guys are kind of starting out learning about spiritual things. The Bible is split into two parts, Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament is probably the first 2/3 of the book in terms of the size, and this is stuff that would happen a few thousand to a few hundred years prior to the birth of Jesus. Then you've got the birth of Jesus, and then the New Testament is basically about Jesus' life and the start of the church, okay? So when we talk about Old Testament prophecies, we're talking about stuff that was written hundreds to thousands of years prior to the birth of Jesus, about the future, okay? And so it talks about Jesus, talks about who he'll be, where he'll be from, all that kind of stuff. But it also talks about stuff that's confirmed not only in the Bible, but through secular history as well. So this would be kind of the rise and fall of kingdoms, different leaderships and wars and stuff like that. And so my rule is, if you find a book that accurately predicts future events, then you have to at least read the whole thing, right? That seems kind of only fair. But yeah, this is a really compelling bit of evidence for me, is the fact that the Old Testament has hundreds and hundreds of prophecies that are confirmed not only in the New Testament, so it's not like just circular reasoning, but confirmed in the New Testament and also through secular historical sources. So yeah, super cool, super compelling bit of evidence in my opinion. Okay, so evidence number two is basically the lives of the disciples. So Jesus has 12 disciples. If you know anything about the story at all, you'll know that one of them goes rogue. There's an incident. The point that I'm making is that you have the disciples prior to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and the disciples after. These disciples are terrified, running for their lives. They basically abandon Jesus and run away. And I guess their thinking is, our leader just got brutally murdered. If we continue to follow him, we're going to be next. So they freak out and they run away. Then you have the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. And then these same 12 disciples, well, the same 11 plus a new guy, they take the gospel and they spread it around the entire world. And I think the question here that you have to ask is, why are these 11/12 terrified individuals who ran scared for their lives, why did they suddenly become like the boldest people? Why do they suddenly take that same message and distribute it as far and wide as they possibly can, even though it means their lives are going to be beyond difficult, even though it means they're going to be abused and beaten and brutalized, and 11 or 12 of them ultimately murdered for their faith in Jesus. John lived a bit longer because he wrote Revelation, so he kind of gets off scot-free a little bit. But the other 11, man, like we have not just what's written in the Bible, but kind of outside the Bible as well. Historically, these guys had rough lives, really, really rough lives, culminating in a pretty bad death. I mean, is there a good death? And I'm looking at it and I'm going, do you know what? If that were me, there is no way I would do that for a lie. And so either these guys were super insane or it wasn't a lie. Evidence number 3 is the evidence of the... my gosh, my nose! No! Evidence number 3 is the evidence of the empty tomb. And it is kind of the longest rolling whodunit ever, right? You know, it's been put forward before that maybe robbers stole the body, or maybe the government kind of officials came and took it. But when you start adding motives to these ideas, they kind of fall apart. Because actually, you know, you take the robber argument, for example. It's like, well, that only really stacks up if robbers kind of went against their natural instinct and left in the tomb the only thing that was worth any money, which would have been the grave clothes. As the Bible records, you know, the grave clothes were left. And so the robber argument doesn't really stack up. Equally, the government argument doesn't really stack up, because those guys, in terms of motive, they actually wanted the body of Jesus to be found so that they could prove he wasn't the Messiah. And so it doesn't make any sense to say that they took it. I think for me, looking through not just ideas of what could have happened, but ideas plus motive, I think the only reasonable explanation for the empty tomb is what the 500 eyewitnesses at the time saw, which was the risen Jesus Christ. Okay, so that little kind of subsection of evidences was part of reason number 1. Let me get back to the main reasons and go to reason 2. The second main reason I want to give you is this. I believe the Christian story because I believe that it explains some of the turmoil that I feel as an individual, and I suppose more importantly, in a sense, it explains the turmoil that I see around me. You know, it's self-evident. You know, we look at the world and we go, yeah, this isn't super cushy, you know? Like, it's kind of rough, it's kind of messed up. And equally, I feel like I look at myself, I look at the state of my own heart a lot of the time, and I feel like there's this paradox between what I experience and what I wish I was. You know, there's this gap between who I am and who I wish I was, and not just in a sense of I wish I had abs, but in a sense of like how I am with people and the kinds of things that I think and the kinds of things I say. And I think that Christianity is the one story that I've ever come across that actually explains all of that stuff. It's the one origin story that actually gives detail to why we experience those strange kind of realities. So I want to just read to you something that the Apostle Paul wrote in the book of Romans. It's very, very short, but he says this: I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil that I don't want to do, I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but sin living in me. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. And then he goes on later to say, what a wretched man I am, who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? And I think, you know, when you condense that idea down, essentially he's describing exactly what I'm trying to articulate, you know. It's that sense of the good things that I want to do, for some reason that's not what comes out, you know, when I think, when I speak, when I act. So much there's this disconnect, and you know, equally with the world around us, you know, I don't look at the world around us and the brokenness and say, oh, God must really hate us. I look at the brokenness and go, well, there's something wrong with this. What's the fix, right? And actually that is the essence of the Christian story. You know, you don't look at the Bible, it's not like God's going, oh, the world's 99.9% fine and dandy, and you know, there's just a few things I don't like and I'm really cross about. It's like, no, you look at the Bible, it's like God's consistently saying, like, this is 99.9% messed up. This is 99.9% wrong. This is 99.9% screwed. And the 0.01% that's good is God entering into human history as the baby Jesus, who becomes Jesus the man and ultimately Jesus the Saviour. So the story is full of language of restoration and repair, and the Bible uses the language making all things new. You know, it's about restoration and rescue. And so I think the fact that it makes sense of those two kind of strange realities that A, we see in the world, and B, we see in ourselves, it makes sense of that paradox. And ultimately, even more importantly, it adds a kind of a bigger story around that we're not just left to our own kind of weird disconnect, but actually we're part of a bigger story where God is, you know, kind of fixing what's broken and repairing everything and bringing it back to the state of perfection that ultimately he created it and us for. Reason number 3 is that I believe that love is the highest ethic. Okay, I believe love is the highest ethic, the highest virtue, and the best thing that any of us can accomplish. And you might be sat there and you might be saying, well, I'm not a Christian, and I think that as well. And that's kind of my point, right? That's kind of my point, is that I believe love is the highest ethic, and I believe that Christianity is the only worldview, the only origin story that enables us to say, yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. Love is the highest ethic. And I'll explain what I mean, because I know I sound a bit vague at the moment. But let me put it this way. If you start from the ground up, and I'll try and explain a little bit of where my thinking comes from and leads to, right? So basically I'm saying, to start with, I look at the world and I say, I believe in intelligent design. You know, I think I don't take an atheistic route, because I think to take an atheistic route is to say time plus matter plus chance has equaled all of the complexity and sophistication that we see, you know, not just in the world but in ourselves. And I don't believe that. I don't believe time plus matter plus chance could equal something as wonderful and weird and amazing as our brains and the world that we live in and are surrounded by. I don't believe that. So straight away I move away from an atheistic view, and that takes you down the road of saying, well, okay, there's an intelligent design, so there's an intelligent designer. There's obviously a creator, i.e. God. And so once you get to that point, you start to say, well, okay, if God made us, then why did God make us? And I think for me, you kind of look at all the different worldviews. You look at kind of an atheistic worldview, a naturalistic worldview, you look at a karmatic worldview, you look at a religious worldview. And then for me, there's this one that stands out as being unlike any of the others, and it's a relational worldview. Okay? And I wouldn't start at that end at all, because I'm totally not atheistic, as I just said. But, you know, I think atheism and naturalism, you're basically made from nothing and for nothing. And I don't believe that at all. I think if that were true, we wouldn't have this sense of injustice when people are mistreated, because it wouldn't be that the people have any intrinsic value. It would just be that it's stardust bumping into other stardust, and it's kind of meaningless, and who cares, and let's just all be nihilists, right? So I don't go with that worldview at all. I don't go with a karmatic worldview, because I'm like, well, if you go with a karmatic worldview, as nice as it can sound on the surface, I also think it's really horribly inadequate, because basically what you're saying is, you know, if a child gets cancer, or, you know, if a single parent dies, or, you know, when something terrible happens, you're basically saying, well, that happened because that person deserved it. And listen, I lost my best mate at 26. And I can tell you, of all the people I've ever met, he was the one that deserved to die least, right? And so I don't believe in a karmatic worldview. And I look at a worldview oriented around religion. So this would, well, basically all of the big faiths in the world, these are kind of religious worldviews, obviously. And I look at that and I say, well, you know, do you think God made us for obedience to rules and rituals and traditions? Well, no, I don't think life's that dull. And then I look at this other one worldview, which I always thought was religious, but I later learned that that wasn't true. And you see Christianity and you say, well, okay, what's the idea there? And it's not a religious worldview, it's a relational worldview, where you say, okay, what was the very purpose for what we were made for? You know, the Bible doesn't invite us into religion for the sake of religion. It doesn't invite us into religion for the sake of obedience. It invites us into the family of God. That is the Bible story, that through faith in Jesus Christ we are we're invited to be sons and daughters of God. That's the whole thing, right? And so I'm looking at all these worldviews and I'm going, that is the only one that enables us to truly say that love is the highest ethic. Because in these worldviews you're saying, well, religion's the highest ethic. In a karmatic worldview you're saying, well, karma's the highest ethic, although karma doesn't seem fair. And then in the atheistic and naturalistic worldviews you're saying, well, nothing has any meaning anyway, so there's no objective truth or ultimate meaning to my life. And so that's, whatever, who cares? And so it's only, I think, in Christianity where we say that love can truly be the highest ethic. And I tell people this all the time, with Christian story, when you look into it and really look into it, you understand it's not about religion, it's about relationship. And that love truly is the reason that we were made for. It truly is the highest ethic. But I don't think you can say that with any of the other worldviews that I've talked about. Love is not their highest ethic. It's only with Christian faith that love can truly be the highest ethic. Guys, thanks so much for sticking with me to this point. I appreciate it's been a long video, but I hope you got something out of it. I hope you found it useful in some way. If you did, feel free to kick it on and share it with someone else. If you didn't, well, you're probably not still watching. Bye.